Hi everyone, welcome back to our lockdown lessons part 4. So today I'm joined by Mark Saville. So firstly, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself, Mark, tell people a bit about yourself and what you and your business does to help people.
Thanks, Philip. So our business is an IT service provider. We provide a range of services. I would say the thing that we deliver most of at the moment is the ability to help a business recover from a ransomware attack. Within that service, it does provide an early warning against ransomware in case you don't know that you've got it. So the people that typically take that service from us are companies or organisations that have had some form of cyber breach and are concerned and worried about their data maybe being infected, but not yet in a way that encrypts the data.
Fantastic. So that's interesting what you said there about people tend to wait until the horse is bolted before they do anything about it. Is that pretty much always the case, Mark?
Well, I wouldn't say it is in every case, Philip, but most organisations feel that they're well protected. They often spend a reasonable amount of money in this sort of area to prevent. But if there's one thing that we've learned over the last 3 or 4 years, is that organisations should prepare for when they have a breach and its consequences, rather than try and prevent it too much from happening, which is the if it happens. So you should prepare for when it happens rather than if it happens. And we sit very much in it will absolutely happen to you. You can do a lot. There is a lot you can do to prevent it, but it's almost inevitable at some point in a company's history that they will suffer this kind of cyber breach.
Sure, I totally agree with you. Having run my last business for 17 years, we had 3 breaches and some other nefarious activity as well that I won't go into now, but I absolutely agree. It's a when rather than if issue, I think, for all businesses really. So just looking at the last 6 months, that's what I'm interested in actually, is at what point did you think there was going to be an issue commercially, not necessarily for yourself, but for your customers as well?
So we have quite a broad range of clients. A number of them conduct business internationally. We know that some of them provide services into the Far East as well. We were kind of alerted. One of them happens to be a risk consultancy, and they do work in the Far East. And they kind of brought back some early warnings that there was something significant happening out there. Probably before even it was starting to be widely reported in the news. We work closely with a software company based out of Canada. And again, they have service providers globally, and we were beginning to get some indications from them that there was something broad afoot. I don't think anyone really expected how devastating it was going to be as we were locking down in March, and clearly some industries were hit significantly harder than others. We don't, fortunately, happen to have any single industry focus, so it's not as if it's affected us totally in the same way it has devastated whole industries like hospitality, for instance. But we have seen some impacts, mainly to decisions, not that people are not going to do this, but they might end up putting it off because they actually don't have a fully active business at the moment. But what we have seen is in other sectors, it's increased their use. One of our clients, for instance, is a membership-based organisation that looks after people if they're having employment problems, for instance, and they've seen a significant increase in their levels of activity. So I would say if you've got a balanced client base across many sectors, then you get a good perspective of those that are really seriously affected and those that actually are having to deliver increased services.
Gotcha, and I think so. I think a lot of the B2B marketplace has done quite well, as long as they've not niched into those areas that you've discussed, restaurants and hospitality, and the poor people that haven't been able to conduct business for one reason or another. Just out of interest, Mark, how have you managed to adapt over the last sort of 6 months in terms of how you've had to change the way you operate?
So again, we as an organisation are quite widely spread across the country. from both how the technical teams operate. Our services are delivered out of data centres, UK data centres. So the services are remotely managed. The support services are provided remotely. We provision our services remotely. We miss customer meetings. We miss partner meetings with the reseller channels that we work with. So that's been somewhat inhibited on the sales side. But overall, we actually haven't seen much change to the way that we operate. What we have seen is clients that were in the process of making change, deciding that they don't want to make any change in the short term. So prospective clients have not moved, but we expect that will come back on stream. And what we have seen is the clients that you work closely with put more of these services through as they've had to get remote workers working, and they've added new services if their organisations have grown. So that's kind of how it's been. But like I say, from an operational point of view, it hasn't really had too much of an impact on us, except we haven't really been getting out to face-to-face meetings.
So I know that a lot of people are actually quite happy to not have to get in their car and go to face-to-face meetings. But other people actually sort of miss that a little bit. What side of the fence do you sit on? Everyone's different when I ask this question.
I miss it very much. I mean, I would say it's probably 80% of my time is spent week on week out meeting people and making introductions and taking introductions and meeting prospective clients, meeting prospective partners. So yeah, it's a big part of my job. And with the salespeople that we have, it's similarly with them. So it's I think it's quite tricky. Our services are not easily sort of subscribed. You don't click a button. In our sector of the industry, there's a real balancing act between ease of use and provisioning and security. And the technology we work with here is very much on the side of security. So from that point of view, it's not a simple click and play type technology. We can set these services up remotely. We generally set them up remotely, but it's not something that the customer self-serves. They don't come to a website and download a piece of software and then start running these services from a backup and a ransom protection point of view. We have to get involved in that.
Okay. So from what you're saying, then sort of we're losing something a little bit by not being able to operate face to face. Yeah,
I would say so. And it's a shame now that just as we were starting to get things back on track, that it's gone back the other way, unfortunately. So yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge for people. Actually.
Sure, I think in certain industries more than others. So what sort of issues? What were the biggest issues you've had to overcome? Would you say, Mark?
During this last 6-month period?
Yeah.
The fact that we're just in an altered state, I suppose, Philip, more than anything, right? Because people won't take, we're not taking those face-to-face meetings. You tend to centre very much on the clients that you already have. You centre very much on the partners that you already have. And there's a kind of limited pool, if you like, of access. The addressable market that you're working in is shrunk. Because even if you do engage with somebody, unless they've got that very immediate problem that they want solved, which would be perfect for us, you have to kind of scale back your marketing efforts a little bit, because that's not yielding you the kind of results that you're expecting. So yeah, there's some unpredictability, I would suppose, and some people can take advantage of that, but most business owners like predictability, don't they?
They love predictability. I think from what I've seen as well, there are a lot of people in the marketplace, a lot of business owners spending an awful lot of time focusing on what they can't control as well, rather than what they can control. And I think if we watch the news channels at 24/7, that's an inevitability, really. People are going to just get scared and go into the sort of fight, flight or freeze mode and not take action and not look, actually, what can I do? Despite all the restrictions we've got, what can I actually do to make a difference to my business now? And I think, yeah, we are seeing that a little bit, definitely, among some people, for certain anyway. So are there any changes that you've made since the beginning of lockdown, Mark, that you would want to continue when we're back to normal?
I think it's made us much more rigorous about where we look for opportunities. I mean, I know that's something you should be refining all the time. It was kind of interesting. I met with an artificial intelligence development company this morning, and we had quite an interesting conversation about the use of AI in terms of profiling decision making that people make. The social media channels have been using that kind of technology for years, haven't they?
Sure, yeah.
Giving us choices, testing, and then they hit you up with the fake news or whatever they want to sort of move you in the direction of. And I'm kind of intrigued as to, we have a body of data now that kind of tells us what the trigger events are for our services to be subscribed, and I'm kind of interested to explore that in a little bit more detail. Actually, I think we've got to be more intelligent about how we go about trying to find the people that have the problem that we can solve, because this is a problem that needs solving, and you have to be very much more targeted about that.
Sure. Is there any sort of proof that during times of hardship, cybercrime increases at all? Have you heard that at all?
So what we do know is that working from home creates increased vulnerabilities.
Interesting.
That's a big issue for organisations. In the very early days, a lot of the partners and the resellers we work with were struggling to get hold of laptops. So the price of laptops went through the roof. As a result, a lot of people started using their home devices, home PCs. These were devices often with old operating systems that weren't patched. It became very difficult to roll out secure networking VPN connections to every home user. So there was a huge spike in the adoption of Office 365 for email. That was the obvious place to go. And Microsoft kind of struggled with that. I mean, there was that increased volume. I think 800 million accounts were created or something.
Wow.
In a very short period of time.
Crazy.
So again, those types of services are vulnerable to attack. Ransomware gets into 365. Microsoft don't back up 365. So they don't protect the user data. They make highly available infrastructure, but they don't back it up. And there's a whole list of cloud providers that don't back up the data that organizations that subscribe to those services think they do. So
very interesting. I had no idea of that, to be honest with you, Mark. I just guessed automatically that everything would be backed up into the cloud. And I think by the sounds of things, I'm one of a few million people that aren't really aware of the dangers of just assuming that everything's going to be okay if the computer goes down or if there's an issue at all. So very interesting, a real eye opener.
There's some good practice around that as well. So
just out of interest, what would you advise people like myself to do if they've got an MS365 account or another account that is not being backed up? Is there anything they could do right away just to sort of mitigate the risk of losing data?
Well, yeah. So I would suggest, I mean, there's probably three things that everybody should be doing if you've got a cloud app, if you've got a cloud service, whether it's Google Mail, if you're using it for business. The first thing you should be doing is using two-factor authentication as your mechanism for checking that it's you logging in. These are no longer private systems sitting inside networks that you need. You have a lot of control and protection around firewalls and VPNs to get access into. That now sits out on the cloud. Anybody can try and attack your email account, your Office 365 account. It's a public-facing website. Okay, and so the first thing I would suggest everybody should be doing is using two-factor authentication. You tie it to a phone or something like that, and it sends a challenge to the phone. You enter the phone, the key passphrase you get on the phone typically gives you an added level of protection. That's the first thing. Secondly, everybody should be subscribing to a dark web trace. I mean, your credentials are probably for sale on the web somewhere with passwords and usernames that were taken as part of the BA breach or the Marriott breach. These are not things that you as a user were responsible for. I mean, I was if you've been part of loyalty schemes or you've signed up for gym membership, or even if you've been in LinkedIn for years, there's a good chance that your credentials are somewhere out on the internet. And if you use the same password for every account, you're vulnerable. So change your passwords regularly, keep different passwords, use two-factor authentication, use a dark web trace, And if you do not have nobody reads the contract, right? Do not believe the marketing hype. Okay, these cloud providers do not want to take responsibility for your data, because that when they do, it takes them into a whole world of difficulty. So with every single cloud provider, either read the contract and see what they offer, or just challenge them in writing, so they have to tell you in writing, or just make sure you've got a copy yourself, which means that you subscribe to a service. And there is, whether you're a single user or you're 1,000 users, there are services that are appropriate. We don't fit all the whole market. I mean, we typically are not working with organizations with less than about 100 users, typically. But there are absolutely valid, reliable Microsoft 365 backup providers that will work in that space. So use a third party.
Fantastic. That's amazing advice, actually. So it's yeah, I can think of a couple of those that I need to take a look at immediately after this interview, Mark. Just out of interest then, a bit on a lighter note, was there anything you did when we came out of the first sort of lockdown, if you want to call it that? Was there anything you did differently personally that you weren't able to do before?
Play golf.
Yeah.
I went and played golf at last. And the golf industry's been pretty good. I think it was one of the first ones out. You're outdoors. I think the infection rates outside, groups meeting outside, are better. Everybody's sensible, socially distanced. You know, the clubs don't want to be locked down. And I believe that there's been a significant growth in green fees charged. So, you know, it's been resurgent for that sector, which is great for me, because the more money that comes into it, better quality the courses will be. I think memberships are up, which is great. So yeah, the first thing I went and did was have a game of golf and continue through the summer.
I've got a friend actually who's a scratch golfer, and he got out every single weekend, and obviously in the week as well. He was probably climbing the walls during lockdown because he couldn't do it. I can imagine he would have been difficult to live with at that time, because he really needed to get out and play, and that for his own sanity, I think, really. So I think that's great that that you've got the chance to do that again, and hopefully that hasn't gone into lockdown then since yesterday, no?
No. They're applying the rule of 6. So, you know, you play golf in groups of 4, providing everyone's sensible. When you arrive, you get out. I mean, they've got things in place. I mean, you can't touch the flag sticks and all of that. So, I mean, they've been really sensible about it. But I think, as a sector, it's been they've been really smart about getting simple rules everybody can understand in place, and making sure that they're well communicated, and you know, they've been consistent with it, and as a result they've been able to keep applying them, and it's holding up. So yeah,
great.
It would be great to see that broadly across other kind of areas, if you know what I mean. So
fantastic. So just so we know, you did mention that you're looking for businesses with over 100 users. Could you just go into just briefly explain who your ideal customer is, just in case they're watching this and you might be able to help them?
Yeah, so I would say, again, there's probably 3 things that we look for in a prospective client. I mean, one is that they really need to be a digital business. I mean, they need to be a business that relies on the data. The data informs their decision making. It's how they largely communicate with their clients and deliver products and services. So if you're a digital business and you understand the value that data delivers, then you need to protect it properly. So that's the first thing, a digital business. And there are, as we know, a number of digital industries, and there are some industries where there's little or no data used even today. So that's the first, I would say. Secondly, that they have adopted practices, right? So it's not as if they're just completely not doing anything in this area, but they are concerned that maybe they haven't done enough. And thirdly, and this is the real one for us, that they've actually had a breach, often through no fault of their own. It's very interesting in the technology market. Technology people always think all the problems can be resolved by technology. The problem with a cyber breach is it's invariably caused by a human factor. Somebody clicks a link, somebody plugs in a USB stick, right? You cannot reduce the risk of a cyber breach to 0, in the same way you can't reduce any risk to 0, specifically around this area. So it's somebody that's either accepting that or has seen it firsthand and doesn't want to happen again to them. So I think if they're a digital business, they've already got some protections in place, but they've had a breach. They typically stand out for us as the type of organisation that we can really help, and give them the peace of mind that they'll be able to recover their data in the event they have another one.
Good stuff. Okay, that's brilliant. So if anybody has any need to get in contact with you, Mark, what's the best way they can actually do that?
Well, they can email me at mark.saville, SAVILLE, at data, DAT, number 2, vault, VAULT.com, or they can go onto our website, datatovault.com, and they can drop us an email to info@datatovault.com, and that will find its way to me.
Fantastic. Well, this video is going to be put onto my website and on LinkedIn as well. So what I'll do is I'll drop into the comments below your details as well, just in case anyone didn't catch that. But for now, thanks so much, Mark. Really appreciate your time. A really great insight into the wonderful world of cybersecurity and golf. So thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Philip.
No problem. Thank you.